Vlad the Impaler was so terrifyingly ruthless. His legacy inspired one of the most infamous horror characters ever created. But who exactly was this real-life Dracula, and what made him truly so feared? I'm Edward, and today we're stepping back into medieval Europe to uncover the chilling true story behind Vlad the Impaler, the man whose name still sends shivers down spines centuries later. When you hear the name Dracula, you likely picture bloodthirsty vampires lurking in shadowy castles. But the reality behind the legend is even more intriguing. Vlad III, ruler of Wallachia, didn't have supernatural powers, yet his brutal reputation spread across Europe, making him the very essence of terror. But here's the question historians continue to debate. How did a single medieval prince become synonymous with cruelty, inspiring horror stories for generations? To answer that, we need to travel back to the chaotic world of 15th century Eastern Europe, a land torn apart by constant warfare and ruthless politics. Wallachia, where Vlad ruled, found itself trapped between powerful empires, the Ottoman Turks on one side and the Hungarian kingdom on the other. To survive, Wallachian rulers had to be cunning, ruthless, and fiercely brutal. Vlad learned this firsthand from childhood. As a young boy, he and his brother were taken hostage by the Ottoman Empire as political leverage against their father. Imagine the fear he felt, growing up surrounded by enemies who could end his life at any moment. But could these terrifying experiences explain the man Vlad later became? Surprisingly, Ottoman records suggest young Vlad was intelligent, highly educated, and even admired by his captors. Yet behind his composed exterior, Vlad quietly learned valuable lessons about power and cruelty, lessons he would soon apply in horrifying ways. When Vlad eventually returned home to claim his throne, he quickly proved himself willing to do whatever it took to secure power. Early in his reign, he invited hundreds of rival nobles, known as boyars, to a lavish banquet, seemingly as a gesture of goodwill. But what happened next shocked even medieval standards of brutality. After dining with his guests, Vlad suddenly ordered them seized. These nobles, who he blamed for previous betrayals and unrest, were brutally executed, many impaled on stakes, a horrific method designed to prolong suffering. This gruesome spectacle was displayed publicly as a terrifying warning to anyone considering betrayal. But Vlad's cruelty didn't end there. He became obsessed with impalement as a symbol of power and control. His victims numbered in the thousands, earning him his chilling nickname, Vlad the Impaler. Imagine living under such a ruler, never knowing if a single mistake could land you on one of his deadly stakes. Yet even more chilling than the executions themselves were Vlad's psychological tactics. He intentionally created horrifying scenes of mass impalement, positioning stakes prominently along roadsides and near city gates. The goal was clear: to instill absolute fear, deterring enemies and enforcing unquestioning loyalty. But was Vlad merely a sadistic tyrant? Or was there a deeper, strategic reason behind his horrific methods? Historians argue Vlad used fear deliberately, understanding that his small nation stood no chance militarily against larger empires. Through terror, he kept rivals at bay and intimidated potential invaders, turning brutality into a calculated political weapon. Remarkably, this strategy was sometimes effective. Enemies often hesitated, fearing the horrific consequences of opposing him. Yet Vlad's cruelty also made him many enemies, both abroad and at home. Soon, stories of his atrocities spread throughout Europe, with exaggerated accounts painting him as almost demonic. Pamphlets describe Vlad dining among forests of impaled bodies, calmly enjoying his meals amidst unspeakable horrors. But here's the fascinating twist. Many historians now believe these accounts were heavily exaggerated or even fabricated by Vlad's enemies to discredit him. So, how much of Vlad's terrifying legend is actually true, and how much is sinister propaganda created by rivals? The reality might surprise you, because beneath Vlad's notorious cruelty lies a complex, even tragic, figure shaped by war, betrayal, and the relentless demands of power. But Vlad's most infamous act was still to come. One chilling event that would forever cement his terrifying reputation and inspire the most famous horror character ever created. In one of history's most chilling acts, Vlad unleashed a campaign of horror that stunned even his battle-hardened enemies. As the Ottoman army invaded Wallachia, they encountered a sight straight from a nightmare, a vast field lined with thousands of impaled bodies, stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Imagine the terror those soldiers felt, realizing Vlad had deliberately created this gruesome forest to break their will. Historians describe this moment as Vlad's ultimate psychological warfare, a desperate but calculated attempt to repel the overwhelming Ottoman forces. Remarkably, it worked. Overwhelmed by horror, the invading army retreated, unwilling to face a ruler capable of such unimaginable cruelty. But here's the question historians still grapple with today. Was Vlad truly a ruthless monster? Or was he a product of his brutal times, forced into extreme actions by the harsh realities of his world? It's easy to judge Vlad by today's standards, but medieval Eastern Europe was a dangerous place, ruled by force, fear, and brutality. Some historians argue Vlad's cruelty was necessary, even justified, given the circumstances he faced. Constant threats, betrayal, and the survival of his nation hanging by a thread. Yet Vlad's terrifying legacy didn't end with his death. Instead, his story took on a life of its own, gradually transforming into legend. Centuries later, author Bram Stoker stumbled upon tales of Vlad's brutal reign, using them as inspiration for his iconic character, Count Dracula, the bloodthirsty vampire. Ironically, the real Vlad had nothing to do with vampires or supernatural creatures, but the dark myths that surrounded him perfectly captured Victorian fears and fascination with the macabre. Stoker's Dracula quickly became a cultural icon, permanently linking Vlad's name with vampires, eternal darkness, and unending horror. Yet perhaps the most fascinating aspect of Vlad's story isn't the terror or the violence, it's the enduring power of his legend. Why do we remain fascinated by figures like Vlad the Impaler, whose cruelty both repels and captivates us? Psychologists suggest it's because figures like Vlad represent humanity's deepest fears of cruelty, power, and the darkness within ourselves. Vlad's brutality forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, leaving us both horrified and captivated. But Vlad's story also reveals another surprising truth: how easily history becomes blurred with legend. Over centuries, propaganda, storytelling, and myth transform Vlad from a ruthless medieval ruler into an iconic horror character. It makes us wonder how many other historical figures have had their true stories twisted or obscured over time. Today, Vlad's legacy remains deeply complex, still debated by historians and captivating the public imagination. Some see him as a national hero, bravely defending his land against impossible odds. Others view him as a monstrous tyrant, whose cruelty forever tainted his legacy. But perhaps Vlad was both, a tragic figure whose life was shaped by cruelty, betrayal, and the brutal demands of survival. In understanding Vlad, we glimpse the harsh realities of medieval power, the thin line between hero and villain, and the unsettling truth that sometimes history's greatest horrors are created by ordinary humans driven to extraordinary extremes. And maybe, just maybe, the most chilling thing about Vlad isn't what he did, but what his story reveals about us. Because deep down, Vlad the Impaler isn't just a terrifying historical figure. He's a reflection of humanity's darkest capabilities, a reminder of the thin line separating civilization from chaos. So next time you hear the name Dracula, remember, behind the myths, legends, and nightmares stands a real person, a man named Vlad, whose brutal legacy continues haunting us today, challenging us to confront the darkest corners of our own humanity.